The accident was just the beginning. 15 survivors of the General Grant shipwreck were stranded on a remote, windswept island. There were no supplies, no tools, and no way to get back. Survival depended entirely on what little they had and what little they knew. Their first need wasn't food or water. It was fire. Without it, the cold alone would kill them. They had exactly 6 matches. No backup, no second chances, one after another they struck them. 5 failed instantly. The final match was all that stood between them and a slow death. Desperation set in. Hunger gnawed at their bodies. Some began to lose their minds. Evidence of cannibalism appeared. The group teetered on the edge of collapse, their hope flickering like the matches they struck. Then James Tier, an unexpected leader, stepped forward. Holding the last match, he dried it on his trembling chest. Around him, the others stood silent, watching. He struck it against a damp stone. A tiny spark flared, then a flame. Somehow, it caught. Relief flooded over them. That fire would burn for the next 18 months. It was more than survival. It was a symbol of endurance. But even fire couldn't guarantee rescue. The island had claimed many before them. The subantarctic winter was closing in fast. Food supplies were dwindling. The question wasn't just when help would come, it was if. And below the waves lay the wreck of the General Grant, hiding more than just tragedy. Over 2,500 ounces of gold were aboard. Was it still down there, resting in silence? Or had it vanished into the sea forever? This is the story of the General Grant, a lost ship, a fight to survive, and a mystery that still lingers in the cold Southern Ocean. The ship was built in 1864 in Bath, Maine, along the Kennebec River. She was a sturdy, 3-masted bark named after Ulysses S. Grant, the Union general who would soon become president. Unlike the sleek clippers of her time, she was built for endurance, not elegance. Measuring 179.5 feet long, 34.5 feet wide, with a draft of 21.5 feet, she was made from oak and pine, materials chosen to withstand the punishing demands of long voyages. Her weight exceeded 1,000 tons, making her solid and dependable on rough seas. She wasn't fast and she wasn't beautiful, but she was a workhorse. With 2 decks, 2 deck houses for passengers, and a practical design, she embodied the standard cargo vessel of the mid-19th century. On her maiden voyage, the General Grant carried goods and passengers from the United States to England, then to Australia and New Zealand. Operated by Holmes and Company, she was part of the expanding web of global maritime trade. As was typical at the time, the General Grant set sail from Boston in late 1865. At the helm was Captain William Henry Laughlin, who was also a part owner of the ship. Most of the crew and officers were American, hired before departure. In March 1866, the General Grant reached Melbourne, Australia. While waiting for new cargo and passengers, Captain Laughlin made a cost-cutting decision. He dismissed his crew to avoid paying wages. Some of those sailors quickly found work elsewhere, unaware they had just avoided a doomed voyage. By April 1866, the General Grant was preparing to leave Melbourne for London. Many of the 58 people on board were miners returning from the Victorian goldfields, carrying the fortunes they had worked so hard to earn. Others were simply eager to reunite with family. The new crew was a diverse mix. There were 25 men, including American officers and sailors from England, Scotland, Ireland, and the US. For the first time on record, 2 women officially signed on as crew. One was the wife of Bartholomew Brown, who served as a stewardess. The other, Mary Ann Jewell, joined so she could stay with her husband Joseph, an able seaman. There were 15 passengers in cabin class, including Mrs. Oat and her 4 children, one of them a newborn. Steerage held 41 people, packed tightly. Among them were 11 children, 2 babies, and 4 mothers. Every one of them would soon face a nightmare. The ship carried typical cargo for the time, but the real attention was on the gold. Many miners distrusted banks and carried their wealth as gold dust, nuggets, or bars. James Tier, a former sailor turned gold miner, had sewn 300 golden guineas into a custom belt he wore under his clothes. In addition to the passengers' gold, Captain Laughlin was responsible for a shipment of 2,576 ounces and 6 pennyweights, about 70 kilograms, of gold bars as listed in the cargo manifest. The ship also carried 9 tons of zinc spelter ballast, a cheap yellow metal used for decoration. Years later, rumors would swirl. Was some of that ballast really gold in disguise? The rest of the cargo included 2,000 bales of wool, animal skins, timber, and other goods headed for British markets. With full cargo and clear skies, the General Grant finally left Melbourne on May 3, 1866. The route was routine, through Bass Strait, past the southern tip of Tasmania, and into the southern Pacific. From there, the ship would head east of New Zealand, round Cape Horn, and sail on to England, following the Great South Circle route. To save time, Captain Laughlin planned to cut south of New Zealand and pass through the tight channel between the Auckland Islands and a jagged group of rocks called the Snares. It was a risky shortcut. As the General Grant neared 50 degrees south latitude, thick fog rolled in. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. Without sun or stars, they couldn't confirm their position. Captain Laughlin grew increasingly nervous. He doubled the lookouts, hoping to avoid the jagged reefs and rough seas ahead. Tension spread through the ship. After 10 days at sea, morale was fraying. Fog, storms, and endless gray waters surrounded them. The crew stayed alert, watching for signs of land or danger. Just past midnight on May 13th, 1866, the fog briefly lifted. An island appeared ahead. It was the Auckland Islands, infamous among sailors for deadly currents, hidden reefs, and cliffs that had torn apart countless ships. Captain Laughlin believed he saw the northern tip of the islands and ordered a course change to the north. But he was wrong. The landmass ahead was actually Disappointment Island, a small island west of the main Auckland group. The course change sent the General Grant straight toward the cliffs. Then things got worse. Around 11:30 p.m., the wind suddenly shifted from southeast to northwest, blowing the ship toward the rocks. Moments later, the wind died completely. The sails went limp. The current took over. Captain Laughlin ordered the sails fully unfurled, desperate to catch even a whisper of breeze. But the night stayed eerily calm. The ship couldn't anchor. The sea was too deep. Powerless, the General Grant drifted closer and closer to the cliffs. The crew and passengers stared into the black waters of the Southern Ocean, gripped by terror. Midnight closed in, and hope faded fast. The ship had already struck the cliffs twice. The rudder was wrecked. The jib boom shattered. A seaman lay injured. Then, like a nightmare made real, the General Grant was pulled into a vast, black cave. The cliffs had seemed to open just wide enough to swallow her. Rock fragments and snapped rigging rained down as the foretopmast collided with the cave ceiling. The mast gave way. Panic spread as everyone scrambled for shelter. Captain Laughlin gave the order, "Bring the lifeboats aft." It was time to abandon ship. But fear froze many in place. The cave was pitch black, the surf was violent, and outside the ship lay only the unknown. That hesitation cost them dearly. 3 men lowered the first quarter boat. They rowed just outside the cave and dropped anchor, planning to help other boats escape. But the captain misunderstood. He thought they were scouting a safe landing for the women and children. Chief Officer Bartholomew Brown oversaw the second quarter boat. It took 30 long minutes to lower it. Women and children hesitated, afraid to jump into the freezing water. Marianne Jewell didn't wait. With her husband's help, she climbed down the broken rudder and leapt into the water, hoping to inspire others. But the obstacles were too great. Mothers with infants couldn't make the descent. They stayed aboard, clinging to the longboat still perched on the quarterdeck, hoping it would float free when the ship sank. Brown ferried his boat to the anchored craft and unloaded some of the survivors. He planned to return for more, including his wife. But the General Grant gave way and sank before he could. The longboat, now adrift, was hit by a monstrous wave. It capsized. 40 people were thrown into the freezing sea. Cries echoed in the dark as the water swallowed them one by one. Mrs. Oates struggled to keep her baby afloat, but the weight of their soaked clothes dragged them under. Only 3 strong swimmers reached the quarterboats. Brown wanted to go back. He begged to search for his wife, but the others refused. If they got too close, they feared the desperate would overwhelm the small craft. The General Grant vanished into the cave, leaving just 15 survivors. 14 men, 1 woman, 9 crew, 6 passengers. They had no choice but to row for land. Disappointment Island was 6 miles away, a lonely, wind-blasted rock in the middle of the sea. It took 12 grueling hours, but they made it. The name fit. The island offered almost nothing. They had a few cans of preserved meat, a little salted pork, but no fresh water. The first night was a waking nightmare. Their clothes were soaked, the wind howled, their throats burned with thirst. Nausea set in. Food and water were running out, fast. After 2 brutal days, the weather finally eased. The survivors made a desperate choice to row for the main Auckland Islands. It was dangerous, but staying meant certain death. They rowed for 2 days. Muscles failed, hands blistered raw. At last, they reached Sarah's bosom, a remote inlet in Port Ross on the northern edge of Auckland Island. Cold, starving, soaked to the bone, they had to make fire. But they only had 6 matches. One by one, 5 failed. If the last one didn't catch, they would die. Maybe even turn to cannibalism. James Tier, the miner who had once sewn gold into his clothes, now held their lives in his hands. He gently struck the final match against a stone. The group held their breath. A spark, then flame. The grass caught. They had fire. And in this brutal world, that meant life. They never let the flame go out, not for 18 months. Winter came. No ships, no hope of rescue. They were completely alone. They adapted, but food remained a constant fight. They snared albatrosses, boiled them into soup, and devoured every bite. They stripped branches to build makeshift beds, but the rain always found them. Slowly, they learned the island. Seals became their lifeline. From them, they made clothes, blankets, and tools. They used the boats to explore Enderby Island, scavenging what they could from old wrecks. James Tier was the sharpest mind among them. Where others saw rust, he saw tools. Everything had a purpose. Survival wasn't just about fire and food. It was about escape. One day, a ship passed in the distance. They lit their signal fire. Smoke rose, but the ship didn't stop. It sailed on, cold and unaware. After that, someone always kept watch. Desperation bred innovation. Tier carved rescue messages into driftwood canoes. They tied notes to albatrosses, stuffed messages into seal bladders, and set them afloat. But the ocean showed no mercy. Predators intercepted the birds. None of the signals were ever found. Time dragged on. Another winter came. David McClellan, the oldest among them, fell sick. He died as spring returned. Their number dropped to 10. One survivor, Coy, clung to a dream. He said his mother had spoken to him. "You'll be rescued in January during your cooking week." But months passed. The dream began to fade. Eventually, they moved to Enderby Island, closer to shipping lanes. They built stronger huts and huge bonfire mounds, ready to ignite at the first sign of a ship. Mrs. Jewell, the only woman, never stopped working. She gathered grass and twigs for the fire. Her clothes were in tatters, but her will was iron. Everyone respected her. Then, finally, after 18 months, it happened. On November 19th, 1867, a cutter appeared on the horizon, the Fanny. They lit every fire. Hopes soared, but the ship didn't stop. 2 days later, another ship appeared. The Amherst, a whaling brig from Bluff. This time, fate showed mercy. The crew spotted their signals. The survivors rowed toward the ship with everything they had left. But when Captain Gilroy saw a ragged group of wild-eyed men, he hesitated. He thought they were mutineers. Only after hearing their story did he offer food, shelter, and rescue. Their ordeal wasn't quite over. They helped the Amherst crew with sealing work for weeks before finally sailing to Invercargill in January 1868. Their survival was nothing short of a miracle. The 4 men who vanished were never seen again. But the tragedy sparked change. New Zealand began placing supply depots on the Auckland Islands, lifelines for any future castaways. Still, the island held one final secret. The gold from the General Grant had never been found. Long after the survivors left, one question lingered. Was it still resting beneath the waves? In 1869, the tug Southland sailed from Bluff in search of the wreck and its treasure. James Tier, one of the survivors, came along as guide. But the Auckland Islands were as vicious as ever. After weeks of savage weather, the team returned empty-handed. 3 years after surviving the General Grant disaster, David Ashworth was still haunted. He needed answers. On March 26, 1870, he set sail from Bluff aboard the 48-ton schooner Daphne, captained by Wallace. Ashworth knew exactly where to go. The skies were clear. The sea was calm. They neared the western coast of Auckland Island, the same cliffs where Ashworth had once come close to death. Ashworth, the captain, and 4 crew members took a quarter boat and rowed toward the shore. The Daphne sailed away, circling the area. 3 seamen remained aboard to keep watch. Time passed. Then a full day. But the quarter boat never returned. Desperate, those left behind scoured the coastline. They searched the sea for any sign, debris, bodies, anything. But there was nothing. No trace of Ashworth or the others. It was as if they had vanished into the same black void that swallowed the General Grant. Rumors swirled. Some said the ship's zinc spelter ballast had actually been gold. If that were true, maybe only Ashworth knew. And he took the secret to his grave. In 1907, the Dundonald sailed in search of the treasure. Tragedy struck again. The ship smashed against the cliffs of Disappointment Island. 12 crew members died. The other 16 endured 7 horrific months before they were rescued by the government vessel Hamoa. At least 9 more expeditions followed over the years. All failed. By 1960, another salvage mission was in progress. Until officials intervened. Too many lives had been lost. 91 souls in total, claimed by the treasure's curse. The New Zealand Marine Department finally stepped in. Further attempts were banned. Still, the dream lived on. Explorer Bill Day launched mission after mission to find the General Grant. But the brutal weather of the Auckland Islands defeated him every time. His expeditions mapped the area and revealed much about the terrain. But not the treasure. The wreck remained hidden. The gold, if it ever existed, lay buried beneath the waves. Some believe it's trapped deep inside the cave where the ship sank, sealed by time and tide. It's said the General Grant carried 70 kilograms of gold, over 2,500 ounces, still resting untouched in the deep. Maybe it's still there. Maybe it never was. But something about this story refuses to die. Whether it's a real treasure or just the ghost of one, it keeps calling. The age of shipwrecks ended with steamships, accurate charts, and the Panama Canal's opening in 1914. But the mystery of the General Grant still lingers. Dark, cold, and unsolved. If you're still here, thank you for sticking around. If you're new, consider subscribing so you never miss an adventure from any corner of the world. More stories are on the way. I'll see you in the next one.